Well, I started writing the blog because I was starting to see things that were incredible. I was being witness to this crazy boom here in Alberta where there was all this money, kids with all this money, and all this excess, and I was like right in the middle of it, driving it home, more or less. My name is Jacob Boss, and I'm here to talk about how I was a cab driver and I wrote a blog about the backseat of my taxi. I chose to drive a taxi here in Edmonton because living a pretty fast lifestyle in Banff, I had my girlfriend from Edmonton come visit me and she got pregnant. So I bought a really cheap vehicle. It was a Tempo. It was a Ford Tempo for $150 with a full tank of gas. I didn't register, I didn't insure it. And I moved to Edmonton to become a father. The differences of driving in Banff and Edmonton were tremendous. I think something that really affected me right off the bat was the fact that the clientele was different. In Edmonton, you're dealing with almost purely Edmontonians, and they had a limited scope because there was a boom going on, and just in general we had a lot of money hungry basic people moving to Alberta to dig up our oil sands, and it was a real culture shock actually realizing what was happening to my province driving the taxi in Alberta. In Edmonton, when you reflected about traveling, because I've traveled quite a bit, I was talking to people who had probably never left Canada and had just maybe moved from another province to make money in the oil sands. That was the dominant people, the clientele in Edmonton were young people who were going out to live life in Edmonton after working their weeks in the oil industry. I was really exposed to those types of people in Edmonton. Those were predominantly all we had here, at that time especially. Young kids with a lot of money. I became a taxi driver because I wanted to be part of the nightlife. I wanted to be a part of the party, which I think goes on at night. People are always going out at night to have fun. I thought it was a cool way to get in on it, you know, and still be involved in something and stay sober. It was extreme. I got to see people behaving like they do in the movies, and I was right in the heart of it, and I wanted to reflect with the rest of my city what I'm seeing, because I believed it to be accurate, to be an accurate reflection of what we do in our society here, the way we behave. People told me everything. Usually, probably the main reason I got so much information out of people inside of the taxi is because I was a night cabbie, and I was catering to people who were under the influence, who were drunk and loaded and having a good time. They loved driving out at night and having an open road, and the same way with the people. The people were all free and open and often inebriated. Drugs and alcohol were probably the main reasons they opened up so much. And I was always one to try to open people up, crack them. Even if you couldn't communicate with your client or their fare for that instant, you got one next who was a shit show and was having a good night. I felt safe on the job most of the time, but I also get a thrill from getting out there, and over time you actually develop a sixth sense about which fares are good and which ones aren't, which people are gonna sketch you out. And it's usually sketchy people who scare you, and you can see the sketchiness, and you can actually see their aura, or whatever you want to call it. You can see them shaking in their boots when they aren't right, and you know better than to pick them up. If someone dangerous gets in your taxi, you have to realize that you let them in there probably, and you have to run on that. And so if they were scary, I would just become a part of their group. I'd find a way to adapt and make myself a part of their little society. If it was just one guy, I was his friend, you know, I was doing my best to relate to what he's going through. So I wasn't in danger, and I protected myself by adapting to the individuals. You have to. You can tell if they're gonna rob you before they rob you. So figure out a way to make them feel like you're their best friend. They don't wanna rob you, they wanna pay you. That's what you had to do. Probably the scariest stuff that ever happened was that in Edmonton, Alberta, we, I think, legally allow drinking and driving. There's next to no check stops. And at the time of my driving the taxi, we used to have signs up that say, "Curb the danger, call 911." And they were actually relying on individuals driving home or whatever it is to call 911 when they were presented with, you know, erratic driving. Definitely a sad story, because that was so often my life was in danger because of intoxicated drivers, which was so basic and such a dirty problem. And the city had no check stops. During the boom, there was a lot of money though, so people did pay for taxis, but also you got a lot of big black, expensive new trucks being driven home from Oil City and from Hudson's with young 18-year-old riggers who, you know, have a girl in there and they're loaded. It was very dangerous and it was very prevalent. Definitely something you saw on a regular basis is the alcohol. Now, my clients that ever have a scary fare, sure, I had a meth head or some drunk walk in with a weapon. Drunks, not so much, but I've had meth heads pull out swords. Weird stuff like that, yeah. But the most dangerous things on city streets was the drunk drivers, definitely the other drivers, and the complete lack of any authority preventing it. It was, and if you called 911 to curb the danger, the police did nothing. They laughed at you. They told you that if you said that there's a drunk who just sped by me at 160, they'd say, "Were you going 160? That's illegal." They questioned me so often that it was actually annoying. It was not worth calling the police because it was a really awkward program that they had, but they weren't preventing it. There it is, there's a sign. Curb the danger, reports an impaired driver, call 911. Curb the danger. So the safety issue actually came from external sources. Other cars, other drivers were probably the most dangerous thing that you encountered on a regular basis, consistently. When I was originally driving a taxi in Banff, we used the CB radio system, so all calls were actually over the radio. We were always in contact. After you make a drop-off, you tell the radio how much, you know, you communicated with your dispatcher on a constant basis. Whereas when you move to a city like Edmonton, it's all run by a computerized system. Everything's about GPS. Your dispatcher's only responding to you when you're calling for help. In Banff, if you don't respond fast enough, they're gonna assume there's a problem. Here, you have to actually say there's a problem. Everyone always knew where you were, whereas here, when the shit hit the fan, if you weren't able to communicate it through the radio, you're gonna hope that someone next to you knows what's going on. You know, I remember one time when I was driving and I saw another cab driver get his throat slashed by a young girl. She was just a young, tiny girl in the backseat of his car, and he drove by me like a maniac. I found a way to catch up to him, and he showed me his slashed open neck. And there was a person in the back seat, and I grabbed my radio, and I'm like, 1081, 1081. I just saw 1031 going eastbound 104th Ave, and he's got his throat slashed, and the passenger's still in the car. And I got dead air. My dispatcher wasn't there. I think now, looking back, pretty poor decisions not plowing through and pursuing him and making sure that he's safe. I lost him. Calling 911 because my dispatcher was unavailable. 911 was able to find the guy through police communication before my dispatcher even came back to answer my call. If a cop who has a gun calls for help, there's always someone to listen. But here, there's no mandatory things that the dispatchers have to do. Because I was just some measly driver saying, hey, there's an issue. They're like, well, we'll make sure that issue doesn't happen again. But they didn't really care.
38 left, 4 down, 420. Yeah, you're careful. The street number?
Driving taxi opened my mind up and made me more in touch with my surroundings than any other job I think could have ever done that. It allowed me opportunity to view society, and it also let me reflect my stories to other people. It was a place to like just jam pack and find out about other people and reflect about one another in a tight little spot. It was great. I loved it. After driving the taxi, I realized that that prostitute you just drove got to be respected and dealt with and given the same opportunities, like from my perspective as the cabbie, and given the same type of service as I would give a judge. Because often those people that we find in the lower cases of society, that those people are usually the nicest. They're able to inspire you, they're able to open your mind because they come out of nowhere. In the taxi, I learned that the best people in the world are the people with the best stories. They're the people who can sit down with you and randomly reflect something that inspires you and makes you want to live your day better. And I wanted to be that to everyone I met, and I wanted to pick up those people who did that to me, and I'm always searching for them still. And I learned that from the taxi.
Ma brosse à dents, puis j'ai noué mon baluchon et je l'ai dénoué pour m'assurer, mais non, je n'ai rien oublié. Je vais partir pour de bon et je reviendrai avec des chansons si j'en fais. Regardez-moi les gars, je suis pas le quart d'un con.